Welcome, everybody. This is our third in our series of question and answers on the Enterprise Universe with Dr. Stalker. Just per the usual introduction to Dr. Stalker, entrepreneur, scientist, engineer, philosopher. Dr. Stalker worked at the Los Alamos Labs, and most recently he's been doing a lot of work in the area of entrepreneurship. And that's really the area that today we're going to focus on, is the fundamentals of entrepreneurship and how that relates to the enterprise universe. In our previous discussions, we've been mainly focusing on the purpose of the enterprise universe, which is spreading goodness through innovation. We've had 2 sessions talking about that. So today, Dr. Stalker, I was hoping we could pivot back towards your 9 fundamentals of entrepreneurship, and maybe introduce the audience to those and just have a conversation about what exactly you mean by these principles for entrepreneurship.
That sounds great, Eamonn. I appreciate the intro there. So we did talk about, the purpose for the enterprise universe and my philosophy, and what it really is about the enterprise universe, what it does. Spreading goodness through innovation. We talked about innovation leading to products and services and spreading those globally, but with the understanding or with the guidance of goodness. So that's really kind of like the gist of what we talked about so far. And, having done this for a while within the enterprise universe, it's not just all about products and services. Obviously, it's about people. So when we're dealing with people, we have to kind of understand what the fundamentals are that guide these people, not only within the enterprise universe, but people from outside also, our strategic partners and customers and so forth. So I have developed these 9 fundamentals, and I actually want to introduce those today, but individually, but organizationally also. I want to introduce what I call the leading environment within the enterprise universe. But we will be going to that at later time. So I want to start with the 9 fundamentals for entrepreneurs. Although, Eamonn, some of these fundamentals are applicable to non-business people. They don't have to be business people to actually apply these, but what I have developed are specifically for entrepreneurs. So here they are.
So it's really focused on leadership principles. Would you say they're really kind of leadership principles then, in a sense?
Leadership principles would come later on. These are more like the fundamentals every entrepreneur should completely understand and use them together. So the leadership ideas would be introduced later on. So one of the first fundamentals, Eamonn, is purpose. We talked about that a lot, and it also is a cornerstone for these 9 fundamentals. So first is purpose, second is vision, third is pathways, and fourth is a recipe for success for your business. And fifth is know thyself. So these are the first 5 set of fundamentals that I actually talk about first in my seminars and workshops. And then I introduce them to the back 4 concepts, the fundamentals. And that is customers, how you deal with customers, and how you deal with people. In general, they don't have to be customers. They could be your neighbors, your spouses, whatever. And then learning. Learning is one of the 9 fundamentals. And then how you deal with competitors. That's also one of the 9 fundamentals. So we may not have the time, obviously, today to go over all of these.
Yep.
And we already talked about purpose, right?
It might make sense then, given the order, to go in order and see how far we get today, just because there's obviously a method to the order. The order isn't random from what it seems to build on itself. So I think we can Do you want to give just a 30-second review of what purpose is real quick, even though we've discussed it in the last two sessions, just for folks coming in new? Do you want to just give a real quick overview of purpose?
Yeah, it sounds great. Actually, I cannot talk enough about purpose because it's that important aspect of the 9 fundamentals. So in purpose, what I say, Eamonn, is one has to understand by thinking about it, by really going over it many times over your career to understand and cull it down into maybe 5 or 6 words, and then write it down. So once you have that, you know exactly what you are about, what your business is about, because that defines everything else, your products and your services, your way of dealing with customers and people and competitors and so forth. So that's the one that we talked about quite a bit. And it's an important thing for the enterprise universe, obviously, as a special organization that's spreading goodness through innovation globally, right? So we talked about that, and I will get to the next one. If you have any questions on purpose.
No, I think let's keep moving, because I'm sure people are curious about what the next few are.
Okay, so next comes vision. So you have a purpose, you started your business, but what is your vision for that business? Meaning, let's put in terms of things that people understand. Let's say you want to have a $5 million revenue company in 5 years. Okay, that's a clear vision for your company where you're going, right? So I always want people to have an objective description of your vision, not this abstract idea that people think about when they say vision. So it has to be clearly stated in terms of something like 1,000 employees or $5 million revenue or whatever, but it has to be concrete for you to be able to understand what that vision is.
And it obviously needs to be aligned with the first one, which is the principle. So,
Well,
or the purpose. I mean, it's not a vision it's in the context of the purpose.
If it's misaligned, then yes, you have to restate your vision. I'll give you an example. So you are into saving the environment. That's your purpose, let's say, for some business. So there comes an opportunity for a $5 million coal plant. Okay, you cannot accept that, even though that's fulfilling your vision of $5 million, but it's misaligned with your purpose. So you have to be strong enough to say no to that opportunity because you have a solid purpose already defined. So you would have to set your vision accordingly.
I think this idea of setting vision is a particular challenge for modern businesses, because we have this, this environmental, social, and governmental, this ESG movement, which is telling businesses that they need to measure, are they in terms of not just profits, but in terms of the environmental impact, the social impact, and make sure that they're governing the entity with based on some humanitarian centric view of things. I wonder if that means that basically what you're saying, at least what I get from that is that you have to quantify your ESG metrics, if you will, in your vision, and they have to be compatible with your purpose. So you have to kind of write down your goals essentially in some kind of a concrete, achievable fashion. Is that fair?
That is true. As a matter of fact, Eamonn, just like they don't have a clear understanding of the purpose, they do not have a clear understanding of their vision too. Yes. So they're essentially looking for an opportunity. Whenever there is one out there, they'll grab it.
Yes.
But they may fail in doing so, but they will be miserable in the end too, because at some point their internal purpose is going to catch up with them. Okay, even though you may not have written it down, but it is there. There is an operating thing going on within you that's going to catch up with you. So that's why I'm saying take the time to write it down first and then set your vision. But never let the vision be an abstract idea. It has to be concrete in terms of a number. That could be a dollar figure or number of employees, number of customers, number of countries. Whatever the number is, you have to have a number that would really be realistic and in line with the purpose.
Right, which gets to the whole, if you measure it, it tends to improve, or even with that kind of a manifesting kind of a concept of if you don't put a number on it, there isn't clarity in the manifestation, I guess. So it doesn't really it won't materialize. You won't be very clear where you're going without some kind of a vision. So in that sense, it's more a quantifiable vision linked to the purpose. Because I think most people would say, well, what's your vision? Well, it's my mission statement or something. I think you're more saying purpose is mission. And then there is some quantifiable objective associated with that mission, essential, or that purpose. Would that be fair?
Right. So the purpose and mission are classically the same, although they have a fuzzy way of defining what mission is. But vision, as we could see, how far can you see into the future with your business endeavor? Next 4 years, 5 years, then figure out what those goals are and make them concrete. As a matter of fact, I strongly recommend choose a goal that's unrealistic. It's even hard to achieve. It's better to fail in achieving something higher than achieving something really small. So it's really up to your personality, but I would strongly recommend going for the big thing that's unrealistic and try to work hard to make it realistic.
Right. And I think so much of life, I guess there's the highways and the byways. So we often get distracted, as you said, from achieving our purpose by the opportunistic. So it takes a lot of discipline, really, is what I'm kind of feeling probably to achieve vision. Because there's so many distractions, it's hard to, and there's a lot of faith, honestly, involved in sticking to a vision versus just picking up on the first thing that comes along.
I did tell you about this in our previous sessions, Eamonn. One has to have discipline. There is no doubt about it. And what I call it, actually conquering your mind, which is really essential if you really want to get close to that objective reality. And perhaps if you're lucky and work hard enough to go beyond that. But all of that requires a lot of mental discipline to the extent where you actually have full control over your own mind. It's not driving you all over the place. And that takes a lot of training.
Right. And maybe we can chat a bit about that. I feel like there's a lot more we could talk about, the mental discipline, and maybe sharing some of your stories about how you what you did to create mental discipline for yourself. But maybe we can just put that aside and just move on to the next one and cycle back to that. Are there any anecdotes you have before we continue about what it means to create that mental toughness or mental capability?
I think we should probably devote another session really just for that, Eamonn. There's a whole lot to unravel there. But for now, I would say make sure that your vision is actually concrete in a number that you could shoot for, you could actually strive to achieve in your endeavors as a business person. Although there are some parallels where non-business people could learn from these, but these fundamentals are for entrepreneurs specifically that I have developed. So if you follow these in totality, all together, not just one at a time, but all of them together, it makes you a powerful business person.
Right. And as I say, there's in this time of transition, I think businesses are struggling both with purpose and with this idea of vision, especially as it relates to, as I said, environmental, social, and governance issues, because it's becoming a much more complicated, that it was relatively unconstrained in the past. And now we're dealing with a lot more constraints as it is as to what good behavior is or goodness is in the world. So we could, and that's obvious in terms of tons of carbon being produced or whatever. So what's the next one that
So
you
just one more point, Eamonn. People struggle. Business people struggle. If you ask them what they're struggling about, they would say there is an opportunity. You know, I don't have enough revenue. I don't have customers. I don't have my supply chain. They talk about all these things without actually understanding the basics of what it really means to be a successful business person. And that is the purpose and the vision defined clearly,
right,
in alignment with your purpose. Those are the things that they never ever talk about as problems, but those are the real problems, not the opportunity or lack thereof. That's a problem. That's a simple problem compared to these high level, critically important aspects. So that's really what
I see. And I think what you've done there is bring me back to, I was kind of talking about it as an abstract, like the idea of a business as an abstraction, the business versus the person, and the fact that the entrepreneur has to have purpose and the entrepreneur has to have vision. I was kind of getting caught up in you know, the out there versus the in here, if you will. So I think
right.
that was good. That was a good catch. I was basically thinking about it as an abstract concept versus something that actually applies to myself.
Right,
so,
right. So
that,
just one other point about vision. You know, the purpose for the enterprise universe is spreading goodness through innovation. And the vision for the enterprise universe is to make it an organization with $100 billion total activity, revenue, investments, and all of that. So there are two companies that could really take most of that in terms of the weather climate modeling company with the global mapping products and services that I talked about, and the load creating renewable energy technology makes up for half of that revenue potential that we are talking about. So that's my vision. So I don't have just the vision, but I actually have a solid number for my own vision and the timeline. It's
right.
about 4 years from now.
Okay, great. And I think but again, I think, I think it's very important that um, these are about, you're talking to the person here, not the abstract corporation. You're talking to the entrepreneur himself. And that was, I think I lost the train of it a little bit there, based on you bring me back to, it's about the person. Yeah, it's the personal vision is the personal purpose, and then you manifest that externally, but ultimately it's coming from somewhere inside. Is what I'm hearing.
And the neat thing about you are absolutely right there, Eamon. The neat thing about being part of the enterprise universe is, even if you are an employee of the enterprise universe, I will consider them and train them as if they're entrepreneurs.
Yes, right,
They're
sure.
not just worker bees like in other organizations. I'm going to encourage them to be entrepreneurs seeking their own goals within the enterprise universe, because the universe is going to be so big and of high quality. It's going to be able to enable individuals to achieve their own goals.
And I think it's a real danger for entrepreneurs that we get caught up in the materialization of humans, in a sense, which is kind of like always thinking about ourselves as things, versus your philosophy is always coming from the inside out versus the outside in. It's like so much of this stuff is outside in versus what you're saying. No, it's got to come from the inside out. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. And, like I was pointing this out the other day, Eamon, in the world of leadership, you don't manage people. You always lead them. and then manage things. And there's a problem with that connection, and we'll talk about that in the leading environment.
Yes.
So we have to think about that. So when you come up with a technology breakthrough, that breakthrough is not the end goal.
Well, I think there's a difference between how you manage conscious beings versus how you manage non-conscious beings, or something like that. I think is what you're kind of getting at, or how you deal. I'm not saying manage, how you deal with conscious beings versus how you manage, less conscious beings. Let's just say that. There might be you might need a different technique, and I think that's part of the challenge our society has, is that we tend to objectify everything, and as a result, I think some entrepreneurs themselves actually objectify themselves, and they become things to themselves, even though they, and they lose the connection to, we're all consciousnesses looking out into the world here. So
that's absolutely true, Eamonn. So one of the things that we really are going to emphasize within the enterprise universe is human beings, yes, and I will be looking at that objectively, are not just things. Yes. They are with people that have the spirit of developing something, not only for themselves, for others. And that's something that we're going to train. And there are folks out there at various levels of their understanding and confusion we will talk about obviously down the road. So that training is going to take place within the enterprise universe, because this organization is a learning organization. Learning is so emphasized that nobody can escape from it, no matter what you do. So you will have to be trained constantly to really kind of come to that level where you're separating humans from things, and you're able to lead people and manage things. But when there is an attachment with things, that's really where things go wrong. And right, that's why it needs a lot of training, and we will be doing that within the enterprise universe.
It's that I've got an interest in things oriental, or the old, that's a bad term, but basically Buddhism and Taoism and stuff like that. And one of the things I came across the other day, which reminded me of one of our conversations, was that in the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha talks to Savutu, who's one of his guys, and basically the point of it was that Savuti had become very much enamored with the idea of emptiness and being, achieving self-mastery. And the Buddha basically says that's not wisdom. Wisdom is when you're giving something to other people. You know what I'm saying? When you're spreading the Dharma to others, and that you might have achieved some level of enlightenment there, mate, but it's not the ultimate enlightenment, because the ultimate enlightenment is giving that back to others and understanding that that's the true gift, is to give it back. And so I think there's, and I'm not exactly sure I understand what the Buddha was saying, but I think there's a relationship to what you're saying, which is that the giving back is an important. It's and again, the Buddha was on about being not suffering, and so I think we suffer less if to some extent, if we have that in our lives, we have a bit more of that giving back. So in a sense that I see parallels between what you're saying and some of those ancient philosophies that I think have a lot of meaning, that have still applicability. Maybe they're obscured by all of this social stuff or historical stuff, but there's a lot of truth in there, I suspect.
Well, there is a thing that we talked about in our previous sessions, Eamonn, and that is your talents and hard work could be used for your own gain. Mm-hmm. Or if you have talents that would satisfy you and there is more left. Mm-hmm. So what do you do with that excess talent or hard work that you have? You obviously have to give to others, because it overflows. You cannot use what you have for your own benefit. But I think where people really become kind of confused about it is that they are unsure that their talents and hard work would be. Hi, how are you?
Good.
Just tell me which one, okay?
Okay, sweetheart. Bye. Sorry,
So,
apologies for that. Go ahead. I'm sorry, James.
So
Yep.
that's okay. So the thing is, when you have talents and hard work, you don't believe that's sufficient for your own benefit, then you cannot think about using that for others, in service of others. So that's where people are confused, because they do not know how much talent they have and how much hard work they put in, whether that's going to be sufficient for their own benefit. So when you
Right.
realize you have more talents and you're able to work harder, that's more than what you need for yourself. That's when I think the realization comes to you, where you could actually use that for in service of others. And fortunately for me, ever since I could remember, I always knew my talents were a lot more than I could ever use for myself.
Right.
And that's really the realization. I think that has to happen for people. I don't know when that's going to happen in their lives, but at some point, if you put your mind to it and you actually consciously work toward that goal, you will be giving that to others.
Right. And I think that's really the case, is that there is a point at which you realize that the universe is giving you more than enough. And that's a sense of personal knowing. And, I think a lot of us, there's a spectrum of us out there. Some of us have more, some of us have less. And I guess there's some element of, that's it. There's a lot to be discussed right there in terms of understanding what your surplus is, and how you can best use that. And I guess that's related back again to purpose. Your purpose to some extent is related to that self-knowing question of, what have I got and what can I contribute?
That's absolutely true, Eamonn. So we kind of touched on purpose and vision, and making it quantitative as much as possible, and also with a timeline. Because if you have a vision of so-and-so achievement, but without the timeline, it really does not make a whole lot of sense. So you have to say XYZ in ABC years. So you have to have that for whatever vision that you come up with. So the third fundamental that switch from there is, now you have the purpose. Aligned with that purpose, you have the vision, but you have to find the pathways to get to that vision. So that's my third fundamental.
Which seems like maybe the hardest of the three is, how do you, navigating is not necessarily easy.
It's not. In fact, there are pathways. There could be a gazillion pathways, but you still have to decide which ones are going to help you achieve your vision in alignment with your purpose. So when you put these constraints on the pathways that are available to you, they become a much smaller number. So that's not like tens of thousands of pathways, but there are only 2 or 3 or 5. That's how it becomes.
So I know that not getting too explicit about it, but I know for yourself that it isn't always a straight path, and that you have had to perhaps create technologies to enable other technologies, if you will, or to create runways. It's not always a straight path, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
It's not, but I wish I knew this when I first started, because if I had my purpose clearly defined, and if I had my vision concrete in number with the timeline, I would have chosen different pathways. And that's one of the reasons why I'm saying it's so important to get the first 2 right, so you could choose the pathways right too, because otherwise you will be, presented with so many different pathways, you would not know which one to take and which one is going to get you to the finish line. You would not know that. But you are guided now by the purpose and your vision. So when you put that in that context, you only have 5 or 6, maybe 10 pathways, but not thousands of pathways.
Yes.
So that really makes an entrepreneur's life much, much easier.
No, that makes sense. And maybe we could chat. Well, we're actually coming up close to the end of our time, but I think I'm personally very interested in the idea of what's the process for basically figuring out the path and how to get from a gazillion paths down to the 3 or 4 that are realistic options for you, for myself or for others. And I think that'd be an interesting place to pick it up, James, if that makes sense to you.
It does. So let me give you my pathways.
Yeah.
So I have 2 technologies as of today.
Yeah.
The weather climate simulation technology and the load creating renewable energy technology. The first one wants to map out the entire world, one country at a time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first company, and that's the vision for it. And it's a $40 billion price tag for that. And the second one is to create load creating energy centers all around the world. And that price tag or the revenue potential is about $40 billion. So we're talking about 80 billion of the 100 billion vision that I have taken up by those 2 technology companies, right? So what are my pathways? My pathways for the first company are to go to 200 plus countries and territories in the world. That's all I want to do. I don't have a gazillion customers.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, I'm not reaching out to any of them. I'm only interested in 200 plus countries and territories in the world. My pathways are to get to them, whether I go to them or whether I invite them to my campus, or a combination of the 2. But that's all I'm going to do for that country, that first company. For the second company, the renewable energy technology company, all of the universities and colleges globally are my potential clients. So I made the research on the number of such organizations in the world. It's about 20,000 plus. So
Right.
I have to reach out to all these universities, and there are about 4,000 or so in the US alone. But globally speaking, it's about 20,000 plus. So my pathways are defined in such a way that I would have to reach out to those clients. So my pathways are narrowed simply because of what my vision is,
Right.
and serving my purpose too.
Yes, right. And who the customers are associated with those. So great. So let's. So I guess we'll pick it up again with another chat here soon. And thanks so much, Dr. Stalker, for another a very interesting and exciting conversation. Really looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, Eamonn. Appreciate it. And this is really heavy hitting ideas. So it's going to be really fantastic for everyone to understand and how they become part of the enterprise universe, whether in the future, near future, or later down the road.
Right, and it's really interesting for me too. It's really we're really getting to some really interesting, personally relevant stuff here. So thanks a million, Dr. Stalker. We'll thank you for listening in, everybody, and we'll chat to you soon.